Welcome to episode 2, guys, of the painting vlogs. For this particular painting that, well, I have considered so many things about and so many directions that it could go in, but I feel like what I want to do with this is go in a completely different direction. It's gonna drastically change. When I first started, I was going by the concept that I drew. That's how I set up the midtones. I set up the midtone to be based off of what the lighting is like in the drawing. Well, now the direction that I want to go in with this is completely different than the drawing is. It's still like all the frame lines and everything. It's good that I put that in there. Now, if I had what I have in mind now, initially, just keep in mind that I would have completely set the mid-tone, the base coat, that the very first step that I put onto the canvas, I would have set it up completely different than it is now, okay? But I had a huge shift in my life very recently, which is urging me to shift the entire meaning of this painting. Now, before, it may have had some meaning to it to some degree, but the direction that I want to go in with it has the full meaning. I think before I had this idea and it was just partial to the full extent of, like, the full meaning of what this painting is going to mean. Before, I just had an idea, you know, I had an idea, I drew it down, but I didn't really have a meaning for the idea that I had. Well, now I think I do. Now I know I do, and that's the direction that I want to head in. So I've got my main frame in, I've got the mid-tone in. The mid-tone is not accurate with the way that the painting is going to turn out to be in the end. And I'm going to do something that I've never done before with a painting. I'm going to go dark. I'm going to go very, 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 very dark. And by the time it's over with, you'll see why. So basically, the mid-tone that's in here, it's not bad. It's a good representation of space, and that's a good thing. But in order for me to really portray what I want to portray, I'm gonna have to go much darker, much darker. So I wouldn't even consider it a mid-tone, because it's not anywhere near the middle. It's very dark, so it's going to be like an underlying dark that's going to fill the space. Now the same principle applies as far as warm and cool. So what I can do from here on is I can go in and I can go back over what I call a mid-tone at this point. I can go back over these cool colors with much darker cool colors. Okay, I mean, when I say dark, I mean dark. I mean, nothing is going to be visible in the painting except for what a solitary light source will illuminate. But the same principle applies where you have very dark, you come forward a little bit, you have neutral, and then you come forward more and you have warm. So there's going to be a cool dark, a neutral dark and a warm dark. So none of it is going to be true black. I'm not going to use black, but I am going to make a natural sort of black. So I'm basically gonna redo what I call the mid-tone. But like I said, I can't, it's gonna be so dark that it's not gonna be considered as a mid-tone. And with me doing this, it's going to perhaps conceal a lot of the lines that I so meticulously put in. But the thing is, they're there. I know where they are. I can see where they are. And whenever I go in and make everything a lot darker, I'm not going to lose the lines. I'm going to keep up with where the lines actually are. They may end up being redefined before it's over with, but I won't lose them. I won't lose where everything is. And that might seem a little bit hard to understand, but it makes sense in my head. So, like I said, if I had this this drawing within me, not like drawing, but if there wasn't something inside of me drawing me to do this before, there definitely is now. And had I had this urge, this pull for me to go in this direction with this painting initially, then like I said, I wouldn't have done what I did. I would have done it much differently. And I've never done this before. I've never gone this dark in a painting. Not fully dark in a painting. All my other paintings, they've been pretty bright, you know. Plenty of light, plenty of, you know, visibility. This one's going to be very obscured in darkness. And you'll see why in the end. So, let's paint. Okay guys, doing a little bit of real time here. So I want to point some stuff out. As you can see, it's clearly gotten dark in this hallway. I've got an LED light overhead. I'm not sure exactly how well the camera's picking up the canvas at this point. Got a lot of wet paint on it. But I'm reaching the point where I'm at my darkest tone. And I'm getting to where I don't want to go any darker than this. And I told you guys it was going to be dark. It is extremely dark. It's so dark that I'm actually starting to lose my lines. And I don't want that to happen, so this is as dark as I'm gonna go, but I want to point this out. I've had issues because basically all I'm doing is I'm repeating what I did in the first video. I'm using a cool, a neutral, and a warm shadow. At this point, that's just what I'll call it. I'll call it a shadow instead of a mid-tone. And it's suggesting space. Now, I've got to get this right. I have to get this right now, because when this paint dries, that's it. There is no more pulling anything out of the dark, or you know what I'm saying? Like I can't, from that point on, if I have to, you know, if I want to lighten anything up, then I'm gonna have to redefine it, and I don't want to have to do that. So I can't stress how important it is that I get this right while the paint's still wet. And I've had issues with blending, just getting the blending to work for me and not against me. And I can't stress enough how important it is to keep the state of your brush where you want it to be, because you can mess yourself up doing this. You can really mess yourself up, and you won't even really know, unless you're paying real close attention. You won't even really know that you messed up until it's too late. And I had some issues down here on the floor with the blending, because what I did is I was trying to get that neutral shadow in, and I kind of dipped down here into the warm shadow and pulled it back up into the neutral. You can see it right there where it's kind of warm right there. It doesn't need to be warm right there. It needs to be neutral. So you just have to stay on top of keeping your brush clean when you switch gears. If you're going to neutral, if you're going to warm, if you're going to cool, you got to keep your brush clean. You don't want to mix that paint. The only place where I'm blending is where it transitions, and I'm trying to get a soft blend where the transition is. You can see this highlight. I hope the camera's picking it up. You can see this highlight right here. It looks pretty cool, and that's awesome. I mean, I like the way that looks, but I don't need that. I don't want that. I'm gonna have to blend right there. That's why I haven't gone over it. It's because I'm gonna go over all of the warm shadow area before I touch this part, because this is the part where it's gonna touch the neutral shadow. So I don't wanna touch that yet until I get done with the warm shadow. And when I get done with the warm shadow, I'm gonna start pulling it up, or not pulling it up, but pulling it in to the neutral shadow, and just very, very softly blending it. I don't like this right here because it's got some warm color in it. Well, the only thing that I can do about that at this point is go back over it with the neutral shadow. When I do that, it's going to get darker. So basically what I'm doing, and I've done this, you know, this is probably my third time passing over the cool, the neutral, and the warm, is that I'm trying to get the value set just right. The tone. I guess it would, I don't know if it would be tone or value, but I'm trying to get I'm just gonna call it tone. I'm just gonna call it tone, but I mean, part of me wants to call it value because it is color. It's not just black and white. So I'm trying to get it uniform throughout the whole painting. It's important that I get it, even though the colors are different, they vary with the space, I want it all to be uniform. That way I have a foundation that I can start pulling highlight up out of. Hope that makes sense. Because it's not gonna look right if I've got an area over here, or I've got an area over there that's just a little bit lighter than the rest of it. It's gotta be uniform. And my lines at this point, like I said, I can't go any darker. My lines at this point are starting to get covered up. I want to be able to see them. I want to know that they're there. You're not going to be able to see them unless you look directly at them. In fact, the camera's probably not even picking most of the lines up. You can just barely see the lines at this point, which is what I pretty much said I was going to do at the beginning of the video, is that I don't really want the lines to be that visible. I need to be able to see them and not lose track of where everything is, but at the same time, I want it to be dark. Now obviously I can't make it pitch black, but I can push it to the limit and make it as dark as it's gonna get before I actually start losing information. See, right now, the thing that makes it really cool, and like I said, I don't know that the video is picking this up, but right now, you can faintly see the lines. You can see the ones in the cool area. Yeah, you can see them pretty good back there. But that's where my light source is gonna be coming from, so that's okay. But the cool thing about it is that you can faintly see the lines, and it's kind of pleasing to look at, because you can step back and you can see the lines, but you can't see them very well, especially in the neutral shadow. You can't see them really well. But just by looking at it, you know that there's a door right there. I can barely see it, but I know there's a door right there. There's a door right there. I mean, your brain just kind of puts it together. So you can see faintly, you can see the lines in some areas, and some areas you can't. Well, your brain is like processing it and putting it all together, where, okay, I can see enough to know that there's a door right there. I can't see the door very clearly because it's so dark, but I know there's a door right there. And that's something that I was really trying to achieve here, because when I first put the lines in, I may have used a little bit too much detail, which, yeah, I'm just saying, like, I may have used a little bit too much information. Might have put a little bit too much of the line in for it to be appealing, if that makes any sense. Well, now that the lines are much more obscured, it kind of brings it back to where it's okay. I'm putting it together. My brain is processing something that I can't necessarily see, but I know that it's there because my mind is showing me that it's there. So now I'm pretty happy with the outside. Now what I want to do is pull the warm shadow up into the neutral and just softly blend it. Just softly pull it up. And try to make it a very soft smooth transition. So that it goes from, you know, being super obvious that those are two totally different colors of shadow. So you're not really, when you look at it, you're not really thinking, well, okay, that's where they changed their color when they were painting. Instead of thinking about it like that, you're seeing it and you're like, okay, well, wow, that really looks like it's further away. If that makes any sense. To where it just naturally shifts. But in order to do that effectively and blend it effectively, like I said, you gotta stay on top of your brush. Keeping your brush nice and clean, balanced, that sort of thing. I'm starting to run out of paint. And the mixtures that I'm doing on the palette, the mixtures that I'm making on the palette are also very delicate, and they have to be very, very balanced, because if I don't get the mixtures right, it's going to change something that I don't necessarily want it to change. Now, one thing that I am a little bit concerned about is when the paint actually starts to dry. Because it's going to flatten as it dries, and it might actually end up making the lines even harder to see. I can see them right now, but as that paint dries, it's going to flatten. And it's like the more I add to it, the more I see areas that I need to go back over. Like now I'm seeing areas in the neutral where, you know, that needs to be darker right there. So this is just it's a long repeating process of trying to balance everything out. I'm starting to run out of time to paint because it's getting kind of late here. But I want to make sure that I get this right before I call it quits. I want to make sure that I've got everything where it needs to be, because when it dries, that's it. So, see you in a bit. Okay. Now I did decide to go back over the cool shadow, make it darker yet again. Just enough. I'm trying to put paint down instead of pulling it up, and it's just creating edges that I don't want, so that's unfortunate. Very, very delicate. here. The thing about this Payne's Gray, and the reason why I decided to go back over the cool area of shadow, is that the Payne's Gray has a blue in it, an ultramarine blue, a bone black, and a synthetic iron oxide. That's what makes the Payne's Gray that I'm using. It's very saturated compared to my neutrals, my colors that I'm using for my neutral and my warm. So it's got more saturation to it. Now, I could fix that while the paint's still wet. I can try to take some of the saturation out of it. But I don't really think that's all that necessary because I am going so dark with it. When I add the highlights, I may actually do that. Desaturate it a bit. I don't think that's a bad idea. But I noticed when I finished everything out here that it was a little bit too illuminescent in the back. And I did say that's where my source light was coming from, but instead of letting the shadow become a highlight, I'm gonna do the highlight myself when the time comes to do it. At this point, I'm losing information, so I need to go ahead and wind it down here. You see that? It's making this hard edge, so what I'm having to do is take my brush, get the excess paint off of it, so I'm not working with too much paint. And the paint that's already on the canvas, I'm kind of pulling it back inward like that, trying to get rid of that super dark area that's got concentrated paint in it. So I just need to leave it alone. Honestly, I need to leave it alone because it's got so much paint on it right now that's wet, and it's just, when I touch it, it's not applying paint anymore, it's pulling paint up. So I need to leave it alone. See that? That one little spot right there, I need to get it. Hopefully I can. Those little areas right there, and it's not, paint's not wanting to lay down anymore. Come on. Come on, work with me. Dab and drag, slightly drag. Okay. You gotta know when to quit. You gotta know when to quit. Okay. Well. I think I'm done adding dark. And one thing I notice is that even though I'm using 3 colors, you know, I've got that right there, that's where I messed up. I added some Prussian blue into my warm and found out real quick that was a big waste of paint because I couldn't get it to go warm. See, I thought that by adding a darker blue to my warm mixture, because my warm mixture is raw umber and ultramarine blue. Well, Prussian blue is darker than ultramarine blue, so I thought, well, I want to make the warm shadow darker, so I'm going to add a little bit of Prussian blue to it. No, it didn't work. It created like a cool, very, very dark green, which wasn't warm at all. No matter how much raw umber or Van Dyke brown I added to it, it stayed that green color, which is a nice color, but it's not what I need for this painting. Anyway, I've got 3. I've got cool, neutral, warm. I've already shown you guys that. Well, when I'm blending in these areas, it's creating a completely different color in the blending area, and that's what's creating the smooth transition between each shadow. Each colored shadow is creating its own unique area. So instead of having 3 areas of different valued shadow, I've actually got 6 now. I've got an area of the Payne's gray, and then I've got an area where the Payne's gray is mixing with that neutral. So it's actually creating a completely different gray than the Payne's gray and the neutral. And then I've got the neutral, and I've got the area where the neutral is mixing with the warm, which is creating a completely different shadow color than the warm and the neutral. So that's 5, and then on the outside I've got the warm shadow. So it's like 6 different areas of color. And basically the neutral, all it's really doing is it's desaturating the Payne's gray, and it's desaturating it's desaturating the cool shadow, and then it's also desaturating the warm shadow. But it's creating a whole different color gray. It's creating that space of area. It's creating that area that it needs to convince you that it's a subtle, soft change. That's what I'm trying to say. Sorry, I'm not so good with words sometimes, but what I really want to do is not stop. I want to keep going. I want to add a little bit of highlight. I want to do it in a subtle way. I don't want to go overboard. I really want to think about what I'm doing, how I'm doing it. I really want to think about my light source. Now I've got these 6 open windows above the doors, which by the way, I added those. They're not in the drawing, the concept drawing. I added those. So I've got those that need to be filled in. I'm debating on what I want to do with those at this point. But what I kind of want to do right now, I probably shouldn't do this, but I kind of need to do it while the paint's still wet, is I want to kind of come in and add some subtle highlight. I want to kind of blend it with the wet paint while the paint's still wet, because this is going to be harder to do, and it's probably not going to look as good if I try to do it when this is all dry. So I mean, I know I don't have enough time to go to a lot of effort right now to do it, because I've got to call it quits eventually. But right now, I would like to just come in and add some subtle highlights to it while the paint's still wet. I think that's probably the best thing that I can do at this point. I might add a little bit of this blending and glazing medium, just a little bit of it. The paint's wet, it's thick. I can do a little bit of wet on wet right now and just slightly come up some, try to pull some light up from what's on here already, and I won't have to make any super complicated mixtures. I can just use a lighter color to do it. It's just hard though, because it's hard to figure it out, because I'm not looking at anything to do this. I'm just kind of picturing it in my head what it's supposed to look like and where the highlight will be. So it's a little bit difficult. It's going to be a little bit difficult, and I'm going to have to make some real conscious decisions on where the highlight's going to be. So let me think about that for a while, and then we'll go back to time lapse. Okay guys, I'm gonna call it quits for this video. Video 2 for this painting series. As you may have noticed, I have changed the title of the painting. It's no longer called The Vertigo of Decay. It's now going to be called The Institution of the Heart. That's what I've decided to call it. I did do a little bit of highlight there, and well, I know I talked about this during the time lapse. It wasn't a very long time lapse, that last one. That looks really light, and I know I shouldn't be going that light, yet. I have to work my way up to it. But that is actually not that light. It looks like it is, but I mean, it's definitely not what could be considered the tonal best. That's just a little bit of mixing white that I added to the Payne's Gray there. It's just a little bit. But because it's so dark, look at how intense it is. It's crazy. It's actually pretty far from the white, as you can see. It's pretty far. So I'm gonna have to build it up. I really don't want to move forward. I mean, I do. I love painting wet on wet with oil paint. It's a blast. I love doing it. But the problem that I'm finding is, in order for me to find the areas where the light's gonna hit, because I'm just doing this out of my mind, I'm not looking at anything to do it, I'm gonna have to start with the light source and I'm gonna have to work my way forward in order to do it. And the light on the other side of that door is so intense that it's actually gonna be pushing forward toward the viewer of the painting. It's going to be very extreme light rays. The light rays are going to be hitting certain parts of the painting, only certain parts, only lighting certain things up. And because it is a one-point perspective piece, I'm going to need the paint to be dry, because the light rays are also going to follow the one-point perspective, if that makes sense. So I'm gonna have to break my yardstick back out to trace the light rays, because I want them to look just right, you know. And I can't do that right now because the canvas is so wet. So I'm actually gonna have to wait to do this. If it wasn't a one-point perspective piece, if I hadn't had been so meticulous with my lines, using a yardstick, using a ruler to make it, then I would absolutely be having a blast right now using my my blending medium and just, you know, going to town with the wet on wet painting, because that's one of my favorite things to do with oil paint is wet on wet. But as it is, it's gonna have to dry before I can move forward. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. You know, it was kind of long. Sorry about that. I'll see you guys next time. And in the next video, what I want to aim at accomplishing is, you know, just working on that light source, trying to map it out, trying to figure out where exactly it's gonna touch, which is going to, once I figure that out, it's gonna basically propel me forward into the modeling phase, because I feel like it's blocked in. You know, what I did tonight, or what I did in this video, is I pretty much blocked it in. That's what I would consider blocking it in, by filling everything in on the canvas to the most extreme value that I want it to be at. So in the next video, I want to map out those light rays. I want to work on modeling. I want to give it some shape with help of where the light is going to touch. And that's what we'll focus on in the next video. So I'll see you then. All right. Have a good one.